Hello, everyone. This is Neville Smith. I'm the teaching director at EVE University. I'll be your moderator today for this special Q&A session with Lahari. Lahari has been an EVE Online player since April of 2006. It's an officer of Novatech Armada, which is a corporation in the Against All Authorities Alliance. He's the executive for Against All Authorities. They have about 2,000 members based in nullsec space and have been an instrumental player in nullsec politics for many, many years. So, Lahari, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you being with us today.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Let's go ahead and dive right in. While those of you who are online listening, if you'd like to ask some questions, feel free to join our lecture.e-uni chat channel in-game. If you have a question for Lahari as we go along, please go ahead and type it in there. Please preface your questions with a Q:, it's just so I can see it a little bit easier. That'd be greatly appreciated. Lahari, let's start first. How did you first find out about EVE Online? What was it that attracted you, and how did you get into the game?
Well, honestly, it was a bit before 2006. It was during another game, Star Wars Galaxies. We were all very excited about a new space game coming up, and a bunch of us hopped into the beta. Believe it or not, actually didn't like the game and thought it was going to fail horribly. And walked away from the beta and didn't come back till a little bit later. It's always the appeal. You know, there's all the games out there have always been about fantasy games, and we kind of like spaceship games. I personally really like sci-fi based spaceship games. So we came back to EVE, and it had become quite a bit more robust, a lot more ships, a lot more activity, a lot more content, you know, at least player based content. So you came back and never left.
Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in your corporation, and how did Against All Authorities evolve, and how did you end up in the position of leadership that you're in today?
Well, the corporation is a corporation I founded. We used to go by, it was sort of a holding corporation. It was called a Novatech Alliance. We wanted to rebrand ourselves so we didn't come off sounding like an alliance, and so we named it Armada. A empire corporation to start off. When we rebooted ourselves, we were just basically trying to get ourselves put together and out into the null space environment. Against Our Authorities, while I knew who they were at the time, they were not really on our radar. We were closer to other alliances such as Atlas and all the and we were fighting Red Alliance and other entities in more of the Scalding Pass areas and whatnot. And we just slowly kind of moved our way through null space, going from one place at a time and increasing our own capabilities as a corporation until we ended up down in the Stainragged area, where we were playing in Ketch and Amist and Teneriferous, and eventually our paths with AAA crossed when they were fighting one of the mini initiative wars, and we decided to start flying with them in another alliance. We had joined Imperial Order, and when that fell, my corporation moved over to Engard, which was a feeder, and eventually sort of a sister alliance in the last big set of wars during the DRF war with AAA. And that's kind of where we grew our friendship with AAA and our own corporation's strength to eventually join AAA. After the exhausting end to all those wars, AAA had some internal issues, and we kind of went into stasis. Novatech stayed. Probably the only, other than Black Aces for a time, the only U.S. corp to remain in AAA during the downtime. And when we started to do the upswing, we were here. I joined the High Council because I was just trying to help Alhana get as much stuff taken care of as possible with regards to Alliance stuff. And eventually Alhana had grown tired. You know, it's a pretty busy job running a big alliance, and especially when you're at a war, and he just got real tired. So they passed the torch on to me, and I've been going since.
And you currently have about 2,000 members in the alliance, is that right?
Right thereabouts.
And you're currently based mostly in Catch, but you are in some other regions as well, is that correct?
Traditionally, whenever AAA takes sovereign space, the first place it goes to is Catch, because we consider ourselves, historically, AAA has been considered an NPC alliance. We don't call ourselves a SOV-holding alliance, although we hold SOV for the purpose of engaging in warfare. We usually live out of Stain when we lose all our space, that's where we go. And when we regroup and then we fight back. We've expanded back into Catch, which is considered our home. We've expanded into Amencia. And of course, with our allies in Stainwagon, we've covered a handful of other regions as well. And it's the whole point of holding SAW for this is to get into the big fight, because other coalitions are going to form up, try to take your space, put fleets against one another, and that's where all the fun happens.
Turin Bay asks a good question here, and I'd like to step back a bit because we have a number of people listening that aren't familiar with the complications of nullsec politics and alliances. Can you tell us at a high level what your alliance is all about? What's your mission, your culture? How would you typify what it's like to be in AAA?
Well, AAA comes with a reputation. What that reputation is depends on what side of a battle you've been with us, or what your experiences have been with us over the years. AAA is a PvP alliance. Well, that is our number one focus. That's why we exist. That is what we do. What it's like to be a part of AAA. It's a little bit kinder and lighter environment now than it used to be. It used to be pretty hardcore, mostly Russian, very intense. We're trying to get to a level of intensity that kind of meets that, but isn't quite as Gestapo as it has been in the past. And I mean, when I say Gestapo, you need to have perfect skills to get into these certain types of fleets. It really is pushing the envelope. And I think while that does make a very superior fighting force on the field, based on where we are right now, we need to try to develop pilots to get to that level, and we're going to have to make exceptions and people involved in fighting and not have such a high standard. And I hate to say that, but it is kind of what we've had to do. So we get people that can fly the current ship doctrines and things. Being with us, it's about learning to fly the right ships. Doctrines are important. They're put there for a reason, and we like to fly them for the various reasons, such as the proper counters to enemy ships. Solid doctrines means a more disciplined fleet. You follow commands, you shoot what you're told to shoot. You do things in a coordinated fashion. You find greater success when you're fighting an enemy that puts as much discipline and effort into their fleets as what you're expecting.
Given the current political landscape, CFC, that coalition seems to be occupying a lot of space in nullsec these days. Obviously, you're operating primarily out of NPC, but do have some sovereignty as well. But where do you fit in the overall political spectrum in or politics, if you will, in nullsec today?
Well, back in the past, alliances like AAA and other alliances, they themselves could stand on their own, usually bloat up, get big numbers, and pound their chest and talk about being the big dog. Those days don't seem to be upon us anymore. It's usually about coalitions. So AAA is not a standalone entity. We have friends, our Russian friends in Darkness of Despair, our friends in Solar Fleet. We have Coven. We have a couple of other a couple of other alliances that work with us, and we form our own little coalition. I wouldn't say little, but we form our coalition, and that is our political base, and we call ourselves Stainwagon, and we control a good chunk of the South. When we engage with other entities such as CFC is a coalition. It's a group of alliances themselves, a very significant, large group of alliances that come together and work as a singular unit. And they have come to our aid down in South when another coalition formed by Pandemic Legion, we call it N3 NPL, but involved NC Dot and Nully and a handful of other alliances as well. These groups come together, they each form their powerhouse, and then they make as to what they're going to hit, where they're going to invade, what type of SOV, whether they're going to do a SOV attack or if it's going to be non-invasion. And what happens is the leadership of these coalitions work together, do deals, decide whether or not we're going to try to trample each other's face into the ground or if they're going to try to have a peaceful outcome. And our place is, we're with Stainwagon, and we work with CFC at times. Currently, they're back at their home, but they may come back down again because they want to fight. The buffer zone. I don't know if anybody would even know the big political thing called the Bot Accord. but it's a giant section of space that is protected from PL from invading, that is held by CFC, and CFC won't go and hit PL space, and then there's some buffer regions, and it just kind of chops up the whole entirety of New Eden's null space into areas where you can't do a whole lot of stuff. And, well, the only battlefields left just happen to be where we live. And so that's where everybody's going to be coming to fight in the future. And that's, again, more politics, CFC stuff, whatnot. I don't know if that gives you a good picture of it, but there it is.
I would think that because of the concerns about the, quote, big blue donut, that is everyone turning everybody blue in terms of standings in nullsec space, having a place to go for good PvP would be considered an asset. Do you consider that one of the reasons why politically you are in a strong position now in nullsec space? I'm
sorry, that broke up when you said it, and I think I missed the middle part, what you had to say. Could you repeat the question?
Absolutely. What I was getting at was that having a place in nullsec where people can go to find good PvP experience would be considered an asset given the current political structure. Do you think that's one of your strengths or one of the reasons why you've been able to carve out this kind of space in nullsec space today?
Well, there's no way you're ever coming out into null space not getting into its politics. It's all about standings, docking rights, holding sovereignty, or even just having permission to fly around an NPC space without getting shot all the time. There'll be some, endeavoring groups that will put fleets together specifically to come and roam but never live in null space, and those guys can be quite successful. And I've seen several pretty strong and well fleeted alliances that have done this. But if you want to hold space, if you want to have anything that you want to call your own, you are going to have to work with others, because you can't just walk in there and take a few systems and everybody around you is going to leave you alone. That's on somebody's territory. All of everything is divided up and designated by the larger powers. And some people are worried about the big blue donut I mentioned in the earlier part, and it really isn't that big and blue. Right now there are some more blue than there needs to be sometimes, but these are usually just done to accomplish a goal, and there's lots of resets, and this happens all the time. Everybody agrees to reset each other. Maybe we'll agree not to invade their space for a little while, but we want to have some big space fights. So yeah, it's challenging, I think, for a startup alliance that has desires to come out into null space and not be renters, to come out into null space and plant their flag and say this is ours, because you're just going to, no matter where you go, you're just going to a tremendous amount of resistance from the powers that be in that area.
You're getting at something I wanted to ask you about, and that is, if I have a new corp and I want to get involved in nullsec and stake a claim, do you think it's possible for a new corp to do that effectively? And if so, how would they do it?
Well, to stake out in null space, you have to be part of Alliance anyway. The SOV mechanics require it. But if you're a new corporation, there's a lot of things that come with living in null space. You don't just go out there and fly around. You need to understand how the mechanics of null space works. You need to know how to make a living. You need to know how to get supplies. You need to know how to manage your system if you're going to work in a system. There's a lot that are going to roam your space, how to operate when they're coming in your space, how to do proper retreats, how to set up everything. It's a lot of little details that you have to understand. A lot of times corporations will, in order to get their foot in the water and just maintain their corporate identity, not be forced into a giant alliance, which probably won't accept a new corp because they're usually going to be real picky, is to go into renter alliances or feeder alliances. And this is typically set up like just about every one of our alliances or coalitions that have these. And it's basically a place where you can go in and you get the opportunity to enjoy the benefits of null space. You don't necessarily have to put up giant fleets and defend your space because it's going to be protected by the powers that be. Kind of learn the mechanics of the space that you want to live in, learn what it's like to have life in null space, and whether or not you want to be a miner, or if you want to be a ratter, or if you want to be a PvPer, or a combination of all these things. And it's a good opportunity for leadership who can try to put all those, guys that want to go into null space, they have these, great delusions of grandeur sometimes. They think that they're just going to pop out there and do all these amazing things, and some do and some don't. And the ones that succeed are going to be the ones that take the time to understand the environment around them and adapt to it and grow in it.
Yep, just like everything else in Eve, nothing is easy. Rosiella Weiss asks a good question here. We had a Q&A session yesterday with the Matani, and the goons found that their internal structure operates best when done with multiple people in the same role, basically operating as teams assigned to a particular corporate or alliance function. What is your internal command system, and why have you organized or selected the way that you have?
Well, whenever you run something like a 2,000-man alliance, I mean, you can always pound your chest and say you're doing it by yourself and, ooh, you're awesome and all that. But the truth is, that's just way too much stuff to be done by any one person. It is good to have a good, solid team. However you decide to label people, title people, whatever roles you want to give them, it doesn't really matter what you call it, as long as you surround yourself with competent, thinking, working, committed individuals that are going to put the time in. They're going to do it. It's going to be thankless most of the time, the things that you're going to have to do to take care of your alliance, to make sure that everybody has everything they need, make sure politically everything's situated, make sure supply chains are set up, make sure people know where they need to be, what type of doctrines to fly, organizing FCs, organizing space, organizing where things are going to be built, how much things are going to be bought, SRP. There's just this long list, and if you try to do it all by yourself, you're never going to get anything done. It is imperative to surround yourself with the best people you can find that are willing to put in the time and energy and care. You have to give a crap about your alliance, because it's their alliance as well. Everybody, if you don't care, people are just going to wander off to the next alliance and drift off, and things are not going to get done, and people are going to get unhappy, and eventually everything's.
How much time do you personally spend daily or weekly on playing EVE Online and managing all of the alliance overhead that's required?
Well, taking on a position like this is like taking on another full-time job. If I'm not physically logged into one of the many alts it takes to run this, it's always on Skype or other command channels and whatnot. There's constant communication. I'm basically on call 24 hours a day. If there's something happens crazy in the middle of the night, I'm going to get a Skype ping, a jabber ping. Somebody's going to text me on my phone. When something needs to be handled, you got to be there to take care of it. And it's pretty much the same with anybody else in the upper levels. You put in a lot of time, lots of time.
Andre Patton asked, a friend that brought him into EVE told him a lot about the Bob Wars. Did you take part in those wars? And what is your view of that and that era of nullsec warfare?
I didn't personally participate in that. That happened when I had taken one of my exoduses. I needed a break and had to step away, and when I came back, that was pretty much at the tail end of it. So I was too busy trying to reacclimate myself into the game. I didn't pay close attention to the Bob stuff.
What about the current era of warfare? We've got the Halloween war going on, although that seems to be starting to wind down a bit. What's your assessment of the current warfare situation? Is this something that you think is a good thing, or just background, just the usual, stuff that's happening in EVE?
Well, anything that produces content, produces good fights, gives you things for your pilots to do is good. Warfare is good. It doesn't matter whether you're on the winning side or the losing side. Everybody wins. Well, not everybody gets the opportunity to win, but everybody gets the opportunity to lose. And it's what we do out here. This is all about getting in the big fights. We just had a couple of really huge fights. The big fight where all the Titans were killed. That's epic. That's that's historic. People are going to be talking about that forever, for as long as that there's an EVE game and well beyond. And be part of that type of stuff, you have to have these wars. You have to have all this animosity. You have to have, the people putting the time and energy and committing themselves to this effort. Pandemic Legion and N3, they put a very tremendous amount of pressure on us inside of Catch. It was a lot of pressure, and it had its effect on us. It has its effect on their morale. Things go kind of back and forth. We trash talk each other, we put fleets out, we try to kill each other. And, then something happens and turns the whole tide of the war. And every bit of that is absolutely exciting. This is why I play EVE. I play EVE to get into those big giant fights. And that's why I joined AAA, because this gives me access to have those fights. And so, the wars are absolutely necessary. Who wants to sit around with billions of ISK's worth of spaceships just sitting around in a station if you gotta, or parked in a POS somewhere, if you can't use them? What's the point? Why do we spend all this time doing this if we can't get in a big fight?
Speaking of big fights, the latest one in BR seems to have produced a lot of publicity for EVE Online, which has been good for the game, bringing a lot of new people in. But do you think those big, giant fights where you've got thousands of ships on the same grid are a good thing for EVE Online, the game, or should they change the mechanics to spread those fights out amongst multiple systems, which I think is an idea that's floating right now?
Well, it sounds fantastic in theory to spread it out, but the whole reason I think we want to spread them out isn't so much. It's more about game mechanic, or I should say the capability of the servers. It's just getting stuck in tie-dye. We've had both in the head camp, the fight, there's two fights that really are important in that period of time. The fight for head and the fight for BTAC-R. Fight for head, the enemy took the field first. They had the field occupied, and when we put in our subcap fleet first, it took up too much space, even though it was a reinforced node. We could never get past, I'd say, about 4,200 people. And that was before we could commit any of our larger assets. They already had their assets in. We had already occupied it with a dummy fleet, which, the system filled up. We had more people willing and ready to have that fight right then and there than the system could handle. So, what can you do? And of course, we knew about that ceiling, so it just worked out the way it worked out. And that was sort of a planned, let's do it kind of a fight. The unplanned accident that happened was, a SOV dropped because they were in the process, to my knowledge, they were in the process of transferring that system, and I guess the corp that was being used as a transfer corp didn't have any ISK, and it dropped the SOV, and an opportunity presented itself. Their fleet was out, our fleet was moving, we occupied the system first, everybody learned from head and discovered, let's just put all the big toys in first and not over-occupy it with subcaps, and a big Titan super war happened. And is that good or bad for EVE? It's good for EVE. It's really good because, first off, that's a bunch of big ships that needed to be eliminated and killed. It's great for the economy because now people have to buy all that stuff to build those things again. But trying to spread those types of fights out, they spend a lot we do in this game, and all it ends up happening is we still find a way to try to get as many people in the same system as possible. We end up with try to make it impossible or not. We want to have bigger fights, I think. I think we'd love to have a 10,000-man fight in a single system, but I don't imagine that's going to be technically possible. So I like the big fights, but I understand the reason why they would want to spread it over multiple systems, because it would be easier to process. Nobody wants to sit in tie-dye, to spend, do you know how long that fight in BTAC-R took?
No, but I understood that tie-dye was, well below 10%, so it was slow.
It was a 24-hour fight. When that fight started, there were FCs that literally had to log out and go to sleep or go to work, and others had to step. That's the importance of redundancy. And step in and carry on the fight. And some guys actually stayed up the whole period of time. It was an all-day fight. It took the entire day, 24 hours. It was or just 23 or 22 hours, the whole day, for that fight to come to a conclusion. And that is, that is one of the things that people don't like, is the tie-dye. And the big giant fights, something that should be a 30-minute fight in 4 hours to resolve, it isn't a whole lot of fun. Sometimes people have to, they have to get up and go to work. We do have real lives. We do have, wives and whatnot that actually want to see our face instead of the back of our head with headsets on. And we need to be able to sit down and battle out 1 or 2 hours and know that we can, win or lose, we can walk away and go take care of something else.
I like that perspective. Rosiella asks another question here. You state that you are a PvP-focused alliance. How do you train your pilots and fleet commanders, and what do you look for in recruits?
Well, I guess the first thing you look for in a recruit is time that they spent in the game. That means, how long have they been a pilot? How often do they hop around corps? How committed are they to any kind of focus? Then you take a look at their kill boards and you see how active they are, and then you take a measure of their skill points and see what kind of ships they can fly. You just you start off the small points and then you work your way up. A pilot to be trained as an FC, well, we have an FC program. There's a room they all get to sit in. I actually see a handful of those very FCs sitting in the channels with us. They get to sit and discuss tactics, work with a seasoned FC. Sometimes they'll do the target calling for them. Sometimes they'll be allowed to do scout work. Sometimes they'll be asked to escort the fleet to a particular location. They just you just kind of feed them a little bit of experience over time. And they either take to it or they don't. And if they wash out, they wash out. If they become epic, then it's your next great FC. As far as the average pilot is concerned, we try to leave that to the individual corporations because as being a PvP alliance, we're built of PvP corps, and each corp has its own culture. We don't try to turn everybody into one thing. Everybody has their own way. And they will train their pilots in roams and camps and CTAs and whatever means that they feel is most entertaining and most fulfilling. And the ultimate goal is to get them all to the designated coalition or alliance doctrines so they can all be in the right matching ships and know how to do the simple things. Because CTA fighting is pretty simple stuff. You just show up to fleet and you do what the FC tells you to do. And that's pretty easy for most pilots. The really skilled stuff is when you go on the smaller gang rooms and things of that nature, and that's going to be done on a corp level.
It sounds like you're looking for people who know what they're doing. You're not a training corp in any way, is that right?
The alliance, our main alliance itself, we're looking for people that have the proper skill base and the proper knowledge. We have feeder alliance and academy corporations where we would train newer pilots. They'll spend time over there. They'll get some access to the fleet. As their skill points and their experience increase, they can eventually move over to the primary corporations and carry on as AAA.
Very good. Idrim Ventaris asks, what advice would you have for someone who's interested in getting involved in corp or alliance logistics and supply chain management, that aspect of EVE?
Well, the first thing is to have the appropriate ships and a working understanding of where to place sinos on stations, how to get in and out of particular locations, have a good logistics path, understand where you can jump in and out of relatively safely with your material, make decisions as to what kind of markets you want to seed. Are you going to want to do multiple modules? Are you going to want to move fuel? What type of assets? You got to make a decision as to what it is you're going to seed and who you're going to seed for. Usually, if you join up in an already existing system, they will just tell you what you need to do, and you learn from it instantaneously. They say, okay, you need to bring this from here, here, and here, and put it over there, seed it there, put it at this price. But if you're kind of starting out on your own, you might have to go to an NPC space, so that way you have access to the stations, and then you can just put your market there, but you need to understand you need to be setting up a market and doing logistics and things of that nature in a place where there's people that are going to utilize you. So it's good to get to know people.
Very good. Hyoyan asks, can you name a choice that you've made that you would consider to be very wise and one that you've made that you would consider to be a big mistake as a leader of a big alliance?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, we're all human. We make mistakes, and we also we make good decisions. It just kind of balances itself out. Nothing really jumps out because I've only been leading this particular alliance since November. Taking the job probably something sometimes I regret because it's a lot of work, but at the same time, it's something I'm very glad I did. So maybe that's about as close as I want to get. I don't really have any regrets yet. There's still plenty of time for those to develop, and I haven't made any decision yet. I don't believe that has just been something to knock people out of the water yet. We still got our best days ahead of us, and I still have my best days of leading this alliance ahead of us. So I'm going to have to maybe answer that another time.
That's fair enough. Let's talk about the future. What are your plans for AAA? What would you like to see happen or develop for the alliance?
Well, once we started building our activity from coming from stasis, we immediately went into warfare, and we went into retaking of space. And then, right as we were starting to finish up taking into the space, we entered into the Halloween War. We've been at war pretty steady for ever since we woke back up. And being in war constantly, well, it seasons you. It makes you, the salted vet, but at the same time, it makes certain things challenging. When I took over this alliance, there was a lot of things that needed to be taken care of. There was a lot of things that were neglected because it just wasn't on the list or whatnot. And I've spent a great deal of time getting people in position and doing a lot of work myself to try to get ourselves to where, our infrastructure is in place. Our just as the guy asked before, our internal logistics are in place. Fleet doctrines are defined, FCs are identified, things of that nature. So now that we are somewhat stable, though there's a bit of pressure off of us, no real heavy warfare just yet, but that'll sure more will be right around the corner. It's just a matter of time. So from this moment of I guess you could say slight break, is I want to see each of our corporations increase its size and increase its capabilities on a PvP level. We want to increase our capital presence. We want to increase our super and Titan presence if possible. We want to increase our fleet numbers and try to define ourselves in our various time zones. Right now, a lot of times people refer to AAA as part of the Russians, but the Russians are just a part of who we are. We have multiple nationalities here. We have Aussies, we have Japanese, we have Germans, we have people from all over, and we're kind of spread out a little bit. So I want to see us start to try to pick one or two time zones and really strengthen those time zones. Make ourselves something to be a force to be reckoned with during those times. So I want to see us continue to grow. I want to see us become stronger as PvPers. I want to see us get more and more solid numbers and have more good fights.
You mentioned the membership coming from a variety of different nationalities and time zones. Do you consider that an asset or a liability for your alliance?
Well, it can be both. If you have people scattered throughout all the time zones, you have a 2,000 man alliance, but you can only put 90 guys in at any given time, and maybe less in other times. So you don't have a focused concentrate of all your pilots in any given time zone. So that can be a weakness, but at the same time, if these corps can continue to develop and grow, that help enhance their time zone, we could generate greater numbers in each time zone. And in an ideal situation, if we could cover the three primary time zones with a significant enough fleet power, then we would be more deadly, because then we could hit anybody at any given time, and we could choose to attack our enemy when they're when they're weakest. Say a U.S. time zone heavy alliance, and we hit them in time zones outside of that. What can they do except alarm clock to try to fight us off? So yeah, it's both. Just on how it develops.
Rosiella asks another question here. Without making this into an advertisement, what advice would you give new players who want to get into a nullsec PvP-focused corp or alliance like yours? The reason for that question is a lot of new players have joined recently because of BTEC-R and the big battles, so they're kind of itching to get into the big fights, but it seems like they're having a hard time doing that. So what advice would you give those new players?
When I encounter new players, there's a lot of little things, bad habits I see them get into early on. And if you can get away from these bad habits and be open-minded to how the game works early on, then you have a long life ahead of you inside of EVE. First thing is, don't ever fall in love with any racial ship. I don't care how pretty it is, how cool it looks. Learn to fly the ships that are the most effective to be in the fight. This isn't a beauty contest. This is about being effective in your enemy. You need to be open-minded, and you need to be prepared to train for whatever ship is necessary, because I believe if you're going to join in a big fight, you want to win. You need to fly the right ships in order to find that success, and you need to have the flexibility so that when it's time to change and train something else, you need to do it and just take care of it. You should be focused. Try not to hop around corps too much. Look for a corporation that fits your personality. Don't be a know-it-all, and don't try to impress people by overdoing it, being overzealous or over anxious. Just learn and listen in the beginning. Learn the doctrines. Be disciplined. Just and chill. It really isn't like it's all hardcore and everything. Just chill, relax, and have fun while you're doing all this. The more fun you have, and the more focused you are on your fleet doctrines, the better you're going to be.
Excellent. Related to that, Svetlana Moskovich asks, what's your view on EVE University? And I'd like to know what your view is on some of the other learning corps like Brave Newbies, RVB, etc., that are in the game.
I think it's a good opportunity. There's nothing worse than dropping into EVE. And when I dropped into EVE, I came in with just a handful of other people that were new. And we joined up with some other guys that were new, and the first thing we did is we tried to attack somebody in Empire space and got concorded like a bunch of noobs because we didn't know what we were doing. And, we're running around struggling to find a way to make income just to buy this next ship. I remember at one point in my earliest part of the career, I'd actually run completely out of money. The only thing there was no way I could get another ship to do the things I needed to do, and I almost found myself dead-ended, and I actually had to borrow ISK. Promise from that point on I'd never be broke again, and I never have been. But if being a noob, just flying around blind, not knowing what I was doing, not knowing how the game mechanics were, not knowing anything, it makes the game a lot more challenging than it needs to be, a lot harder than it has to be. So if you have the opportunity to be in one of these organizations where you have competent people that are going to be a lot more friendly than some of these guys out here, that will take the time to show you how to do things and to make sure you understand the game mechanics and what you need to do. You're far better off for it. And I think it does everybody a service because it allows a pilot to be more engaged in what's really going on rather than just being lost in a big universe.
Very good. I've got a couple of questions I want to get to, but Andre Patton asks a good one. We haven't talked much about the metagame. And we were chatting about the Mittani about this yesterday. What's your view of conducting warfare outside of the game and the forums and the smack talk and the positioning and the spying and so forth? How much do you engage in that, and how important do you think that is?
Well, the spy game, yeah, we all participate in the spy game, at least any of us that have the extra accounts to do so. And it is an important part of understanding what your enemy's going to do because they're doing it to you. The smack talk, well, I troll a little bit in local myself just to kind of rile some people up and make them think I'm all pissed off and, off my rocker when really I'm just egging them on. But overall, I personally don't care too much for the comment sections of the various sites, like the Eve News and the Mittani site itself, and I try to avoid the various forums where there's a lot of just trash talk. But it is an important part of the game. This is how people are playing when they're from work and they can't log in. This is how they engage with their community. Whether it's venomous or intelligent, it doesn't really matter. It's EVE. And as long as people are talking about EVE, as long as people are talking about how crappy AAA is and how evil the Mittani is and how blue everything is, that means people are engaged. These people are talking about it. So that is an important part. It brings exposure to what we're doing here. It brings more pilots in. It brings, suddenly you start talking to your friends. What are you looking at? Oh, I'm reading this site. Oh my God, was that big fight there? Yeah, you want to come? I'm in this alliance and blah, blah, blah. It gets more people interested. So with regards to the smack talk and the various forum sites, that part of the metagame, it's just exposure. It's more announcements. With regards to spying, that's just business as usual. This is how things are done, as long as things are done with a certain reason, as long as you're not cheating when you spy, trying to hack people and DDS them and steal their accounts and things like that. That's not acceptable. But if you can sneak through somebody's security through their background checks and whatnot, that's a skill into itself. That's a game unto itself. It's an entire array of personal skills and social engineering that you have to work through just to get through it, and it shouldn't be underestimated.
Very good. Yeah, I think it's a key part of Alliance. I don't see how you can function without it. Hyonian asks another question here. Obviously, we have a lot of people who are interested in getting into a major alliance, and he asks, what is the entry level or novice for a novice-friendly corp inside AAA? What should they know at a minimum before they even think about applying?
Well, if you're a low skill level, which I'd say 15 or less. Some set it as high as 30 million or less. It just depends on the corp and what they're looking for. You're going to most likely end up in the Academy Corps. And the Academy Corps, we just hold them to a completely different standard. We don't put as much pressure on them to be in certain kinds of ships because we just know they can't be in them. You can't fly your Tengu with your T2 rails, and we understand that takes time to train, and that's the place to go to train. And if you can't fly your T2 Logi and things of that nature, when you want to get into entry level, the best way to get in is to be able to fly an important ship that is needed by that group. For us, as I said, the T2 Logis, the Tengus, whatever class of battleships, a lot of these guys fly Damis, there's Typhoons for DDE, whatever the base doctrines are for them, as long as you can get into that ship and fit it correctly, you have a better chance at getting into the corps, because at the end of the day, you need numbers. You need people that can get into fleet and be effective and be part of the doctrine. So as long as you kind of have somebody in mind, learn what it is that they're flying, and make sure you can fly it.
Good advice. Idrum Ventaris asks a follow-up question here. You mentioned fleet doctrines a number of times. Where do they come from? How do you develop them in AAA?
Fleet doctrines are, what it is you take you take your enemy and you look at their strengths and their weaknesses, and you try to develop a doctrine that best counters them. You also try to have doctrines that are set to do specific tasks. So say you use the Typhoons. Well, nobody really likes the structure grind under the pressure of a tremendous amount of super capitals and whatnot able to drop us at any given time. We're not able to drop our dreads or supers during the earlier parts of the Halloween War because it would put them at risk. The seer numbers would end up with BR every day. So you have to put in a sub, which is less enticing and also a little bit more maneuverable. So you develop a ship that is capable of hitting the structures as effectively as possible and something you can get the most people in. So that's where you ended up with things like Typhoons and some of the like the males and the rooks, so that you could go out and hit the structures and take care of business. The other is, like, we use our Rail Tengu fleet. The Rail Tengus are very effective against a lot of fleets. They're difficult to be hit with bombs. They are pretty quick. They have a pretty, as a group, individually, they're not spectacular. They require Logi ships to keep them repped, and they require of a certain number in order for their DPS to be worthwhile. But if you get that combination together, the whole doctrine with the right fleet numbers, you can dominate just about any kind of fleet, with the exceptions of the ships that are specifically tailored to take out Tengus. Just a couple weeks ago, we had a fleet, I can't remember, it was a relatively small fleet, like 60 guys, took on 111 guys and killed over 100 people, and that was a Tengu fleet. The doctrine, they were fighting pretty much a kitchen sink fleet. A bunch of renters came together to defend their space. They put up a good fight, but they died because the doctrine was something that was fine-tuned to be able to just basically take out the majority of the general kind of ship types that you would fight. And even outnumbered, they were able to decimate. Doctrines also, you go to the next level, the Slowcat and the Wrecking Balls, the things that we have to fight. Those are doctrines. Those doctrines are designed to require an escalation of larger ships and significant numbers in order to break them, because they have a solid, they have a lot of DPS with their alpha, with all the drones being assigned to one guy. So you get a perfect alpha, which is a DPS that is superior than if you had the sentries firing in independent groups. You have them all close together. They're capitals, so there's a lot of hit points there already. Plus, they're spider webbing. They're webbing themselves. They're repping themselves, making them have a nearly unbreakable tank. And so they can fight superior number of subcap ships, even our Tengus, even all types of stuff, because that doctrine is built to handle it. And so that's the importance of doctrines. In order to kill a Slowcat, you need to escalate yourself to a point where you can alpha the Slowcat faster than you can repair it. So you have to develop a doctrine to counter that, and that's how doctrines are made. If you guys have followed the Matani, he came out with something a while back. He called it the Omega Fleet, which involved a bunch of dreads that were able to, instant alpha Slowcats, and that's how that whole doctrine was developed, to specifically counter the Slowcat. So that's how doctrines are made. It is when you have a doctrine, which is your general purpose doctrine to just go out and you take care of business. Then you have specialized doctrines which are designed to do a very specific task, like the Typhoons to do structures, or the Slow Cats to just basically drop and you can do a lot of damage for structuring. That way you can also hold back significant subcat fleets, things of that nature.
Excellent. Good definition. Thank you. One of the things that I have been reading a lot about lately is the problem of force projection in nullsec space. One argument being that it's too easy to move forces long distances in nullsec space. Do you agree with that? Do you think there needs to be some changes to force projection in null space?
Well, people are going to move regardless of what people think about it. People are going to go where the fight is, no matter how hard it is to get there. Now, we can make it a miserable, terrible, horrible trip to get there and stage, or we can leave it the way it is. I'm not sure how I really feel about that. I know that the nerf to jump gates a good time ago, where you could only have one jump gate per system, was something done to help kind of mediate that a little bit, force you to go through a gate so you could be camped in between posses. We have our Titans, which we can bridge tremendous fleets, quite a good ways, and we can go from Titan to Titan if you have enough of them. Titans aren't cheap. Yeah, sure, PL and the group, they can lose 59 of them and replace a couple of them, a week until they're all back and up and running again. But they're still not cheap. It's still a lot of work and logistics to have them, to build them, and to maneuver them. And it puts them at risk whenever you use them, even if you are sitting in a POS. There's always the danger of losing. So I do believe that the risk versus reward is something that needs to be taken into consideration when dealing with such things, because those Titans are pretty significant. You can set 4 or 5 of them up, and as a matter of fact, what is it, N3 is they set up a couple Titans to be able to maneuver from where they were parked to where they were going to stage, and they had the Titans going up all day long, so much as they announced, so everybody knows. They just bounce back and forth all day long and get their pilots in position. It's important because if we want to have these fights, you got to be able to get people to where the fights is. Let's say you live out where CFC land, all up there in the north, and that nice big, probably a good third of the space, and you're happy sitting up there and making lots of ISK and sitting pretty and happy, but you got some PvP pilots that want to get in a fight. What are we going to make them do? We're going to make them take 2 weeks to travel all the way around and get back down to where we are, or we're going to get them to where they can deploy in a couple of days and get into the middle of action.
That's a good point. I understand your perspective on that. What about SOV mechanics? Nothing's been done to it really since Dominion. Would you want to see any changes to SOV mechanics, and what would they be?
Well, one of the worst rewards that you get in a SOV war is when you beat your enemy and they are withdrawn from a region, and they are just paying the bills to keep the region alive. You are now rewarded with endless timers and grinds. There's, unless you can pay the enemy or talk into doing something, or they decide to just drop things, or if you do some political shifting and whatnot, the only way to speed that process up is through your other means. And otherwise, you're going to have to go through the multiple timers for iHubs, multiple timers for stations. You got to put up the SBUs. There's a 3-hour delay immediately on the SBUs. It's just a ridiculous amount of work for all your reward. That's your reward. Yay, you've got an entire region of space that is completely undefended, and you're going to spend the next 2 weeks trying to flip it over to your side. I think that is something that is tedious. Usually when a group has committed to fighting a war to the point where the enemy does withdraw and gives up, or goes to regroup so they can, come back and fight again later, you shouldn't have to spend the next 2 weeks trying to grind out space. There needs to be some kind of mechanic to where things can be turned over a little bit easier. I think they need to make it a little bit more interesting as well. I don't know what you would necessarily do to make it more interesting, but it is not fun to just go and shoot iHubs and then stations and then have to come back for a timer a little bit later. It's uninteresting. You pray. You're sitting there praying that somebody will come and resist. Please come, somebody show up and shoot us. Come, bombers, bring something and come shoot us, because we're just gonna be bored to death with all the SOV grinding.
What about industry and nullsec? I mean, there was some changes in the latest patches about helping to beef up some of the asteroids and mining out there. But do you think there's been enough changes to helping to grow industry in nullsec space?
Well, I think I've seen some improvements with regards to some entities that we have, like some of our own renters and some of our coalition renters and whatnot that will come. They're going to be the ones that do most of the mining and such. I think I've seen some improvement in it. There are still aspects of the game that make living in null space kind of a pain, such as the AFK cloaky. That's something that comes up every so often. I'm not a big fan of it. I think there needs to be some way to make sure that pilot's actually there instead of having a whole day and these guys can't mine because they're miners. They don't have the ability to stop a black ops drop that decides to do it at random. So there's still always those risks that come with being in null space, but specifically the station increasing the building slots, the other increases that they had done to the stations to help that along, I think that's done some good things. The changing to the value, it's definitely getting more trit, and that's the most used mineral out there. I don't know if the changes to the industry ships to make them specific for PI or not has been helpful. I don't really talk to a lot of PI guys, so I don't really know if it did them any good. But I guess any change is good change.
You mentioned some of the changes here that, what I want to ask is, what about the new mobile deployables that have been introduced to the game? Do you think they've been a good addition? For example, ESS and its effects on ratting and nullsec has been somewhat controversial. What's your opinion on these new mobile deployables that are available?
I think the idea of having mobile deployable devices is in the right direction. I think they should come up with more useful things. I think maybe move the POSes into a more mobile deployable thing and other structures. I think the ESS is definitely controversial. I think that one in particular is stupid. I think they could have probably put a little bit more thought into something and a little bit more useful. All it's managing to do is cause more arguments, and there's really not as much risk versus reward to that. I mean, I don't know. I just don't feel that one was a very good one. I also don't think the Sino jammer that they put in really has a big enough influence, because what does it matter? They'll just Sino in a different direction, or they'll Sino in an extra 100 and fly by. It's just, I don't think it's as useful as it could. But they're going on the right idea. They're just, I just don't think all the things that they're putting in there. The mobile, the mobile, what do you call it? The mobile depots. Those are pretty cool because they're small, and it allows you to refit on the field, which is a good, strong asset. But I've also noticed that in any case such as that, they can be abused. I've seen several instances where several dozen of those have been deployed on an iHub or on a TCU to do whatever it is that they want to try to cause that to have happen. So it's easily abused. But yeah, if they could just screw in with us and give us something that's a little bit more useful, like a bigger range on the bubbles, and why are they so busy trying to screw with ratters? People don't like to rat anyway, and now you're going to make it even more tedious. Okay, balance it up. But give us something we can use. Allow us to deploy POSes anywhere we want to in space, so that way we don't just, people have to scan them out instead of just fly to. It's more useful things that we can use in combat. Carry on and grow that.
That makes sense, yeah, especially having POSes deployable wherever they want, or maybe the mobile device, mobile deployables being able to become the POSes and being placed anywhere they want. I was thinking of a mobile deployable idea where it might uncloak an AFK cloaker if it doesn't move after a certain period of time. I think that's been suggested. What would you think of that kind of idea?
I don't even care how you do that. I think, make it to where you have to force ping it, make it where you have to fuel the device. I don't know, put some stront in some module. I don't care if it's attached to a POS or if it's a mobile device. A person has to physically go, flick a switch, say it's going to send a pulse. The pulse will uncloak somebody. If the person's there, he'll recloak himself. If he's not there, he's got until the guy scans him down to get back. And I think that would be reasonable. Of course, then you get controversial. It's like, well, does that work for only on regular cloaks or covert op cloaks and things of that nature? I think you could work the mechanic to where a covert op, because somebody puts some more time into the skill and into the ship, that they'd have a greater chance of resisting being decloaked than a standard prototype cloaking device. They need to give something. There has to be something. Give us, an expense and an opportunity in a limited time. You can only pulse it every hour or so, something like that, and make it, like I said, fuel, things of that nature. Make it to where the guy has to work for it, but give us the ability to try to break somebody's, AFK cloaky.
We're getting close to our end time together. Thank you for the amount of time you spent with us. This has been great. Couple of questions for you. First of all, what is your personal favorite thing to do in EVE Online?
Well, I like to be in big fleets. Anytime I can get into a big, giant, unbelievable stupid amount of people in the same system and shoot each other and have a good time of it, that's what I like to do. That's the big space battles that made me fall in love with EVE.
And what's your least favorite thing to do in all of EVE Online?
Structure grinding.
Yeah, no one seems to like to grind structures. That just seems to be part of but it is an unavoidable reality of nullsec, living in nullsec space. Is that right?
Yeah, unless if it's the unavoidable reality of a SOV controlling or switching. If you don't live in null space and hold any SOV, as I said in the early part of this, there are alliances that are completely devoted to living in an NPC station and then going from area to area and roaming for the sake of having PvP. Those guys living in null space don't give a crap about structure grinds, but for the rest of us, yeah, lots of structure grinding.
That's a good point. One last question. What advice, again, would you have for new players who have joined EVE University or joined the game who are thinking about getting into nullsec space? You've given us some good advice already, but do you have any final parting words or thoughts that might be helpful to them?
Well, I covered earlier about finding the right ship to the target audience or to the target alliances that you want to buy with. But the other thing is there are a lot of tools to make this game easier, to make it a little understand. There's the .land maps. There's all types of API-driven tools. The better understanding you have of your tools, the greater control you're going to have over your destiny, and the more information you're going to have at your fingertips. So that does mean go read the news sites, the websites, go use the API tools, have the tools to help you plan, design your ships and EFT. Use the EVEMON and plan out your skill paths and have multiple skill paths in case you have to adjust. Use the tools because they make it easier. There's a lot of things in EVE that require patience and tedium, and the more tools you have at your disposal and the greater understanding you have of the more you're going to know about your own piloting, the more you're going to know about the people around you, and the better decisions you can make about your career.
Excellent advice. Thank you very much for your time with us today. I know our students and those who are listening to this recording appreciate it. Good luck and with your ongoing development of AAA. We want to let you know that you are very welcome to come and speak to us at EVE University anytime. We're always have a lot of interest in nullsec politics and nullsec living as well. One last question for you. Are you planning to go to FanFest this year?
I would love to go to FanFest. It just depends on how real life goes, jobs and family and whatnot. I wanted to go to Vegas, and I was just about going to, and I had to cancel last minute. But one of these days, I'm going to go to one of these events. I've got to. Those are awesome. I just want to be a part of it.
Well, if you do go to FanFest, I will be there as well as other representatives of EVE University. It'd be my pleasure to buy you the adult beverage of your choice, so look me up. With that, Lahari, I want to say thank you once again, and thanks to everyone who's listened in here today. Lahari, appreciate you being with us today.
It was a pleasure to be here.
We will be posting this recording here on our Eve University class library, so be looking out for that. And also, this is one of a series of lectures that we are offering throughout the month of March, because this is the 10th anniversary of Eve University's founding. So please check your calendar and feel free to join in. The remaining of these kinds of lectures will be held on our public Mumble server. Thanks to everybody for joining. Lahari, appreciate it very much. Everybody, we're going to close out now. Get out there and fly safe.
Fly safe, guys.